everybody doing today? Back again on another video for you guys. And today, what I have for you guys is my comparison slash versus video of the Moto X Pure Edition and the iPhone 6. Now, I've been using both of these phones for a little while, and it's only right that I compare them side by side with each other, especially with the simple fact that right now, if you want to pick these up today in this configuration, they can pretty much be had for the exact same price. So, that being said, let's jump right into this video. So the first thing I want to start out talking about is the build quality of these phones. Let's start with the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, the build quality on the Moto X Pure Edition is really, really solid. There's no rattling, there's no creaking, and it actually feels quite solid in the hand. So build quality for the Moto X Pure Edition is actually really, really good. Now, up next, let's talk about the build quality on the iPhone. Now, the build quality on the iPhone is pretty good. It's pretty good. Now, there's a little bit of rattling when you shake it. But other than that, it's built quite good. Quite good indeed. But, again, because of that rattle, if you had to ask my opinion, now I'm going to do my best to try and keep my opinions out of this, but where I feel my opinion needs to be dropped, I will put it. But if we're talking about build quality, in my opinion, I'm going to have to go with the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the display. Now, let's start off with the iPhone. On the iPhone, you have a 4.7-inch IPS LCD display. And it has a pixel density of about 326 pixels per inch. Now, display-wise, I would have to say that the iPhone's display is pretty good. Pretty good indeed. Now, the only problem that I would have with the display is outside in direct sunlight, you really got to crank it all the way to the maximum if you still want to be able to see it. But aside from that, I would say that the display is really good on this guy. Alright, next, when we talk about displays, now we're going to talk about the 5.7-inch Quad HD display on the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, I believe this guy has some crazy PPI about 5 and change. For more information on these devices, please check out my full reviews. If you want some more in-depth information, please check out the full reviews that will be linked down below. Let me just throw that out there. But now, in terms of display, when we talk about the Moto X Pure Edition, I would have to say the display on this guy is really, really good as well. Now, when we talk about brightness, I have to tell you guys, this guy gets really, really bright outdoors, and I really have no issues with it. And you can see if I crank it up all the way, if I put it directly at the camera, it really does give the camera some exposure issues. So we're going to go ahead and crank it back down. But in terms of display, I would say that the display on the Moto X Pure Edition is really, really good as well. So, that's it for the displays. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the hardware and software on each of these devices. Now, let's start off with the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, this guy has a 5-megapixel camera in front with LED flash. It has dual front-facing speakers. It has a 5.7-inch Quad HD display. It has a 21-megapixel camera on the back with LED flash. It has 3 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of onboard internal storage, and micro SD card expansion up to 128 gigs. Alright, now, in terms of software, it's running Android 6.0 Marshmallow which is not the latest version of Android, but it works. It works. I'm having some focus issues here. Sorry, guys. We out of focus. Yeah. But in terms of software, it's running Android 6.0 Marshmallow, and I must say the software experience on this guy is really, really good. Now, with the fact that it's running 6.0 Marshmallow, you do get adaptable storage, so you can make your internal SD card you can make your SD card the internal storage for the device. So I actually have a 128 gig card in here, and it works phenomenally. I've had no issues, and I've actually shot a ton of videos with this device. So, and that being said, the overall software experience has been really, really good. But I do want to point out, from a software standpoint, when you're doing a lot with this guy and you got a ton of stuff going in the background, it tends to make it a little bit slow. But not slow as in unusable, but you will notice a performance dip when you have a ton of things going in the background. So that's that. Now next, let's talk about the software and hardware on the iPhone here. And you guys let me know the camera quality, because I'm shooting this video with my Moto X 2014, the second gen. So you guys let me know how that camera quality looks, and I apologize for the focus issues. I'm still getting used to this boy. So next, when we talk about the hardware and the software of the iPhone 6, hardware wise, we have a 4.7 inch IPS LCD display, right? We have the lightning port for charging as opposed to the micro USB over here. We have a 1.2 megapixel front facing camera. We have your volume buttons and your notification slider over here. We have an 8 megapixel iSight camera and your LED flash. We have 1 gig of RAM, and we have 128 gigs of built-in onboard storage. Alright? Now, Now, there's no micro SD card expansion, so you really got to spend a little extra to get the most tier. If you're going to be, if you're the type of person that you know you're going to be doing a lot, then you will have to spend the extra to get the highest tier, and that's what I have here for this model, 128 gigs, because there's no expandable storage. Keep in mind now, the prices on these guys are exactly the same right now for these configurations. Now, in terms of software, you're running iOS 10.1. which is the latest official version of the iOS software. And I have to tell you guys, it runs extremely well. There's been no app crashes, there's been no freezes, there's been no reboots. It just runs fluidly, stupidly well. And I've had no issues with the software on this guy. No issues whatsoever when it comes from a performance standpoint. So that's that. That's the software on both of these. Software and hardware on both of these. Now, in my opinion, when it comes to the software, I'm going to have to give the edge to the iPhone device. Alright? Now, moving on, let's talk about the Wi-Fi in these guys. Now, Wi-Fi wise, these guys are packing almost the same loadout. They have Wi-Fi 802.11 BGNN and AC, which is dual band, so they have access to the 2.4 gigahertz band and the 5 gigahertz band. So, let me just pull these up. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Alright, and we're going to jump in to the Wi-Fi speed test and go to the results. Boom. Now, when we talk about Wi-Fi on both of these guys, I must say they both perform really, really well. Let me get to the Wi-Fi section right here. Really, really well and without issue. Now, I had no issues with the Wi-Fi on either one of these. Now, but I do want to point out, in terms of overall range and strength of Wi-Fi in both of these devices, I would have to give the slight edge to the iPhone over here. Because although they perform similarly, in instances where I was at locations with really bad Wi-Fi, aka my grandparents' house, I realized that the Wi-Fi on the Moto X tend to drop a lot more than the Wi-Fi on the iPhone. So I have to give the edge in Wi-Fi to the iPhone device. Now, what I want to do next is give you guys a little sample of the Wi-Fi, because I know you guys don't like it when I talk about it, you like it when I show you guys stuff. So right here, and this will also be a nice little built-in speaker demonstration, so I have some non-copyrighted music loaded up, and I'm going to let them play, and I'm going to let them play at 2 different volumes here. I got it already preset to 50%, and then I'm going to bump it up to 100%. So right now, we're going to let the iPhone go first. Now the iPhone has one speaker on the bottom here, and it comes out that way. And I must say, speaker wise, it's pretty good. Before I let you guys hear for yourself, but I have to tell you also that it's really easily blocked. But that's enough said. Let's get into this. Alright, so that's 50. Let's bump this. 100. Alright. In the interest of speed, we're just going to give y'all that. Now, Moto X Pure Edition time. And this is where I have to throw my opinion in. In my opinion, you should always have speakers like this. Now, the Moto X Pure Edition has dual front-firing speakers, and they're, not only are they in the right position, but they get very loud, crisp, and clear. Just wanted to throw that out. So, let me play this. Alright. So, there we have it. Now, as I've said, in my opinion, I'd have to give the slight edge in the speaker department to the Moto X Pure Edition, because not only does it sound better in my opinion, but it's actually located in exactly the right spot. So in terms of my opinion, if you were going to put speakers anywhere, you'd have to put them on the front, and they'd have to be facing towards you. Obviously, that's just the best place for them. So in my opinion, I give the edge to the Moto X Pure Edition. Now, moving on, let's talk about the Wi-Fi bands in this guy. Now, I'm not going to get in depth into it. I'm just going to tell it to you real quick. Now, the iPhone 6 comes in several different models, and depending on which one you get, you pretty much have the same bands, just determining whether it's locked or not. But with the addition of the Chinese or the UK bands, you get the additional bands of band 38, band 39, band 40, and band 41. Now, the same thing could be said of the Moto X Pure Edition, but this guy is truly unlocked for every carrier. Every carrier. Now, if you get the international version, which is the European version, you get the same bands as the iPhone 6 and the same UK bands as 38, 39, 40, and 41. But this guy, in my opinion, if you pick it up, it's going to work on any carrier. You just drop your SIM in and you're gone. Whereas this guy, you have to make sure it's unlocked first before you drop your SIM in and it's gone. Now, these are both unlocked, so I had no issues dropping my SIM in and being on my way. But from a LTE and band standpoint, I would have to recommend either the UK version on the iPhone or just picking up the regular unlocked version of the Moto X PE Edition. But in bands and support, it's pretty much a tie game there. Now, moving on, let's talk about the Bluetooth. Now, Bluetooth-wise, I've had no issues with either one of these devices. Now, on the iPhone, you have Bluetooth 4.0. On the Moto X PE Edition, you have Bluetooth 4.1. And they both work really, really good. But in the Bluetooth department, I would have to give the edge again to the iPhone. Because I found that on the Moto X PE Edition, although it does work, there's a little glitch in there that when you have multiple devices connected at one time, and then you go to turn it off, I'm guessing the Bluetooth module doesn't recognize that it's turned off. So sometimes I have to toggle on and off the Bluetooth to get the built-in speakers to fire back up. So that's a little glitch, and it's a little downside. Does it take away from the experience? A little bit, but it still works, and it still works well. But in that regard, I have to give the edge in Bluetooth to the iPhone. Now, let's keep it moving. Now, let's talk about the GPS. Now, in terms of GPS, I would have to say that these guys are tied across the board. Both the GPSs in these guys work extremely well and without issue. And I had no problems with either GPS at all. Aside from on the iPhone, there were a few instances where I was using GPS navigation and it took me to the right spot, but in the turn by turn, it was calling out the wrong street names. Now, it was still the right location, it was just giving me the wrong street names. But other than that, it worked extremely well and without any other issue. So in terms of GPS, I would have to say these guys are a tie, or you can say, because that never happened on the Moto X PE Edition, you can give the Moto X PE Edition the slight edge. Now, moving on, let's talk about the call quality and the speaker call quality. Now, I must say, guys, that this again is where these phones perform exceptionally well. And because I have no issues with the internal receivers of these guys, callers said I actually came up very crisp and clear and were quite loud, and there was no static or distortion of any kind. And the same thing can be said of the speaker call quality on these phones. Now, if I had to pick a winner, because this is a comparison / versus video, I would have to say I would give the slight edge to the Moto X PE Edition because it gets that much more louder in calls and it gets that much more louder on speakerphone calls. But in terms of usage, I would say they both perform really, really well. Now, let's keep it moving. Let's talk about the cameras in these guys. Now, camera-wise, let's start off with the iPhone. Camera-wise, you have a very straightforward point-and-shoot experience, but with not too many features built in. You have your standard HDR, you got your panorama, you got your timer, and you got your filters, and you got your modes across the bottom. Other than that, it's very straightforward. It's very point-and-click, and you're off to the races. You got your slow-mo. And this one does slow-mo at 240 frames per second at 720p and 120 frames per second at 720p. Now, it's really straightforward to just take a picture. You add the grids and you snap and you take a picture. You hold down for burst mode. Boom. You can't get any more simpler than the experience on the iPhone. You can also control your flash right there and switch between the rear and the front facing camera. How you doing, guys? Man, and it's just that quick to take a pic. Now, on the Moto X PE Edition, let me go over here because we're going to look at this camera sample in a minute. On the Moto X PE Edition, it's, in my opinion, just as quick and just as easy to snap a pic. Now, you just tap to snap, and you can flip to the front facing camera like so by hitting this button here. Oops, where is it? There it is. And there you go. Boom. Just that quick. And you also have the same aforementioned features on the iPhone. It just looks a little bit differently. Yeah. So if you want detailed a detailed walkthrough of the camera interfaces on each device, please check out the full reviews down below. But now let's take the time to talk about these camera samples here. Now, before I do that, let me also tell you what these cameras shoot at. Alright? Let me pull this up there. Pull this up first. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Alright. Pull that back up because it looked like it went away. Alright. Let's go over here. Now, in terms of cameras, we might as well start over here. Now, I already told you that the iPhone does a 240 frames per second slow-mo and 120 frames per second slow-mo. It also does 1080p recording up to 60 frames a second. Right? Over here on the Moto X PE Edition, it does 120 frames per second slow-mo, and it does all the way up to 4K UHD recording, and yeah. But in terms of cameras, if I had to pick a winner, and we're just going to use this as a sample, and keep in mind, guys, follow me on Google Plus if you want to see all of the camera samples for either one of these phones. There's a ton of camera samples on my Google Plus page using the Moto X PE Edition, and there will be a ton using iPhone 6. But in my opinion, again, if I had to pick a winner when it comes to the camera department, I would have to give the slight edge to the Moto X PE Edition. And why is that? Because in my opinion, the iPhone looks good, but it looks a little cool from time to time when I'm taking pictures, whereas the Moto X PE Edition's camera seems to be spot on almost all the time. And that's even if I'm taking pictures with the flash. The iPhone camera seems to come out very cool. And, you know, it's like, wow, was that really what it was? It come out very cool, almost with a blue tint. Whereas this one, the Moto X PE Edition, tends to be spot on the majority of the time. Sometimes it tends to be a little warm, but the large majority of the time, it tends to be spot on. So in my opinion, if I had to give the edge to somebody in the camera department, I'd have to give it to the Moto X PE Edition. Keep in mind, there is a big discrepancy when it comes to camera internals, whereas this has a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera and an 8 megapixel camera in the rear, and this has a 5 megapixel camera in the front and a 21 megapixel camera in the back. But at the end of the day, a good camera is a good camera, and if it takes good pictures, I'm going to tell you it takes good pictures. If it takes crappy pictures, I'm going to tell you it takes crappy pictures. Really, the megapixel count plays a role, but not as much of a role as you guys would think. So, that's the cameras on these guys. Now, let's keep it moving. Now, the next thing I want to talk about with you guys is the overall gaming experience on these phones. Now, and I really have to tell you guys, from a gaming standpoint, these phones should be able to handle any games that you throw at them without issue. Now, these were the ones that I've tested on the iPhone, and I've also tested those same ones on the Moto X PE Edition, and they performed without issue. Now, in terms of GPUs, the Moto X PE Edition, just so you guys know, has an Adreno 418 GPU, and the iPhone 6 has a Power VR GPU in it. And really, guys, these guys are going to push any games that you guys want without issue. And this is surprising to me, because if you talk about the overall age of the iPhone, to have a phone that still performs well in the gaming department with all these high and intense games coming out, and for it to perform well at the age of the device, I would have to say that's really good. That's a really good call on Apple's department, tweaking it the way they did, so it performed so well. Now, that being said, if I had to pick a winner, I would have to say it's probably a tie, in my opinion, when it comes to the gaming department on both of these devices. So that's that. Now, let's move on. I'm going to skip over the benchmarks, because again, certain benchmarks I could find on iOS and on my Moto X, I couldn't find the same ones across the board, and I figured if I can't do it in depth the way I would like, I'm just gonna go over it. Now, if you guys would like, leave me a comment in the video description, and I will go out and try to find benchmarks for the iPhone. If you look on my review of the Moto X PE Edition, you do know I have those benchmark numbers for the Moto X PE Edition. But y'all already know, benchmarks are just pure numbers. What really matters is the overall balance between hardware and software that equates to an overall smooth and fluid user experience, which equates to a good user experience. Now, that being said, let's keep it moving. The next thing I want to talk about with you guys are the overall battery life and charge time of these devices. Now, let's start off with the Moto X PE Edition. Now, when it comes to battery life on the Moto X PE Edition, depending on what you do, you may or may not get through the day. Now, if you use it lightly, you're going to get through the day. With the Doze feature, it has really good standby. It has really good standby, so you're not going to have any issues. That being said, with my actual usage, I'm a pretty heavy user, guys. And pretty much for me, I was pretty much able to get 4 hours of screen on time regardless of what I was doing. Same can be said of the iPhone 6 over here. If you're a light to casual user, you're going to make it through the day with tons of battery to spare. The standby, I apologize for that airplane flying overhead, guys. The standby on the iPhone 6 is incredibly good. Incredibly good. Now, I did this just to test it. I charged it up to 100, and I put it down, and I just wanted to see how long it would go before it dropped the initial 2 or so percent, and it lasted a really long time, guys. It lasted a couple hours before it did that, and this is overnight. I charged it and put it down overnight, and I woke up the next morning and it was still at 100. Same thing happened with this guy over here, but it took a slight disadvantage because it dropped the initial percent. So when I woke up in the morning, it was at about 99%. Keep in mind, I had notifications turned on both of these guys when I did this test. So the standby on both of these guys is really, really good. But back to the point at hand. If you're a light user on the iPhone, you should have no issues. Now, if you're a heavy user like myself, you should just barely be able to eke out about 5 hours of screen on time, at which point you have to sprint it to the charger. So in the overall battery life department, I would have to give the slight edge to the iPhone 6. Keep in mind, this is just in my opinion, and these are just using my results. If you're a different type of user, your results may vary. Now, let's talk about the overall charge times. And this is where I believe Motorola takes the advantage handily. Now, when we talk about charge times on the Moto X PE Edition, Motorola included the turbocharger. And what does this mean? This theoretically means that you can get from 0 to 100 real quick. And that being said, if we talk about, let me just give it a number for you guys. If we talk about 0 from 100, it took anywhere from about an hour and 10 minutes to about an hour and 15 minutes. Please check out my full review for the exact numbers. Now, if we're talking about 20% to 100, took about 45 minutes or so. Again, check out the full review for the exact numbers. Now, over on the iPhone, don't do it. That shit wet. Don't do it. Now, when we talk about 0 to 100 on the iPhone, it's gonna take anywhere from 2 hours and about 45 minutes to 3 hours to reach a full charge. Granted, this is using my rapid charger that I have, that I've done a few videos on, so you guys could check those out. Now, if you use the standard charger that Apple provides you, don't do it. That shit wet. Don't do it. If you use the standard charger, then you're going to look at anywhere from about 3 to 4 hours to reach a full charge. Now, if we're talking from about 20% to 100 with push notifications and things turned on, with the rapid charger, again, it's going to be about 2 hours and 45 minutes, just over 3 hours. Now, with the standard charger, forget about it. I was sitting there for a minute. I tried. I just couldn't do it. So, in terms of charge times, in my opinion, Motorola just mopped the floor with Apple in that department. Come on, Apple. Step up your game, man. Step up your game. It's not cool. These are mobile devices. We're not supposed to be plugged